know by now, for the last few weeks we've been looking at this incredibly rich composite symbol, the mandala of the five jhanas. And tonight we're going to hear three, I suppose, more personal talks, more short talks from three people about their relationship with one of these jhanas, one of these five Buddhas. So Vidyavachin is going to say something about Amoghasiddhi, the green Buddha of action, with his very powerful gesture of fearlessness. And Ed is going to tell us something about Amitabha, the Buddha of infinite light, the red, warm Buddha of metta, the infinite light of metta. And Moksatara is going to tell us something about her relationship with Vairocana, the illuminator who sits at the center of the mandala and gives his light, which illuminates the whole thing. So first of all, Vidyavachin is going to talk to us about Amoghasiddhi.
Okay, am I working? Okay, good. Hello, everyone. Lovely to see you all. So tonight I'm going to be talking about Amoghasiddhi, the green Buddha of fearlessness. And I do have a particular way of connecting with Amoghasiddhi, and that's probably mostly in my life that comes through my connection with nature. So Amoghasiddhi I've always sort of considered to be the Buddha most kind of closely related to the natural world of nature, so for sort of obvious reasons, primarily the colour green, but he's certainly, very important to me in my life for these reasons, and nature and being in nature has always been a very significant part of my life. I grew up in mid-Wales in the countryside, and a lot of my childhood was spent sort of making dens and traps and not harming anyone, but it was mainly to guard against incoming forces, the enemies we consider them to be. But anyway, but a lot of it also was just kind of spent getting to know the different wildlife around us and sort of jumping into massive rhododendron bushes and things like this. And so it's always been really important. And then, things like in later years going on solitary retreat and being surrounded by nature. And then since I've moved to Sheffield, something that's been very important has been I've got an allotment in the Riverlyn Valley where I've been kind of creating, I suppose, a nature garden or a garden in the wilderness is sort of how I'm doing it. So I'm going to talk about a few things which are both qualities of Amoghasiddhi but ways I connect with him. So the first thing is when I'm in nature, it's a context where my sort of consciousness can unwind and come back together. And there's a couple of reasons for that. So one is that no matter what's going on with my mind and whatever conflicting emotions there are, sort of anger or frustration or fear or anxiety, when I enter into nature, if I go into this, going down and be in the allotment, I'm surrounded by nature, which is always wilder. So it's like nature is always wilder than me. So to give an example of that, I was in the Padmaloka garden last year, and I heard this sort of awful cry from behind me. And I turned around and I saw that this sparrowhawk had taken out a blackbird. And it's just quite shocking, actually. Sometimes you sort of see these things in nature, the sides of nature that aren't nice. And it's really quite shocking just sort of seeing that happening. But it does give you those sort of glimpses that there's this whole world where there's animals sort of fighting for their lives. And you see the birds sort of flying from tree to tree and looking around. And it's because they're scared for their lives. And so, not to kind of celebrate the harshness of nature, but entering into nature is entering into a context which is wilder. And so somehow my own wildness then, my own kind of craving and anger and frustration and fear can sort of unravel into a context where those forces are just bigger and the stakes are higher and it's much broader. And I notice this when I'm with children in nature. So So sometimes I go out with my nephews, and my brother tends to tactically send them running up hills to tire them out. It's a very good kind of tactic, that. But what I do notice is that there's something about being with kids in nature where it's just like you can just let them absolutely run amok, but it's entirely appropriate. Whereas, if the same behaviour in the aisles of Morrison's supermarket, you'd sort of think, what are the parents up to? What kind of parents let their kids behave like that? But it just gives you a sense of the importance of the context. In nature, that wild energy can be expressed, and it's entirely healthy and entirely appropriate. So just the same, with all of us, we can kind of find that wilder, broader context in nature. But contrasting with that, nature is also deeply peaceful. Yeah, nature is nurturing. Nature is growthful. You see the birds feeding their young, and you see the plants growing, and also just staring at the colour green just has this pacifying effect. So there's this new kind of hippie thing which flashed up on my Facebook feed about forest bathing. So that's a new trend, apparently. That's what people do. So, but it is definitely a thing. I do notice that when I'm down in the garden and sitting in, we're surrounded by green and surrounded by nature, and I just do kind of unwind and relax and let go, and so nature just has that restorative, peaceful influence. And so these qualities of the wildness and the peacefulness are also qualities of Amoghasiddhi. So you might just about be able to see that Amoghasiddhi, he rides through the air on this great throne, which is supported and held aloft by these half men, half bird beasts called shang birds, yeah, and they're just these kind of wild hybrid creatures who are completely untamed, but they're, well, in one sense they're untamed, but they're supporting and serving the Dharma through holding aloft Amoghasiddhi, and he's flying through the air. And at the same time, he's holding up his hand with this gesture of fearlessness and, saying, do not be afraid. So both of those qualities you see in Amoghasiddhi. Now, the second thing I'm going to mention is unobstructed success, yeah? He's the Buddha of action. That's what his name can be translated as, unobstructed success. So when I'm down at the allotment, what I've noticed is that I have loads of energy just to pour into what I'm doing. I seem to be able to kind of just keep digging or keep, cutting or whatever, and I seem to have a lot more energy than I would if I was, I don't know, trying to clean the house or something like that. Sorry, Pradaya. But yeah, what I find, the reason for this is because it's entirely what I want to be doing, and it's creative. So when I'm engaged in something which I find, inspiring and creative, what happens is that all of my energies come together. I don't feel the need to distract myself through kind of going on my phone, and I can just pour my energy and my heart into what I'm doing, that creative action, and that's just sustained. Yeah, it's just sustained by that desire. And so an example of this is that I've been kind of digging this ditch out to create a pond, but it's not just the process of digging the ditch, because I kind of take photos as I go along. And then, so even after kind of digging it for hours, getting exhausted and coming home, I just want to look at the photos of the ditch. And I got tirelessly teased for that. But it's just something I find so satisfying about it, and just kind of, staring at this photo of a ditch. And other people find it slightly concerning, but I can assure you it's very healthy. Anyway, this thing of energies uniting and an action, the symbol of the double Vajra, is a good symbol for this, that Amoghasiddhi is holding there. And it's a symbol where these are double cross thunderbolts, where there's energy pouring out in all directions and energy available to give to skillful action and creative action. Whilst in the center, it's just held within this deep stillness of equanimity. And that's what I notice, is that I've got the energy because I've got the stillness, that the activity that I do down there comes from a very still a very kind of integrated place, that my energies are united and come from a still center. And as such, they're not neurotic. You know, it's not reactive. It's not compulsive. It's coming from a still center, even the ditch. So, and that kind of activity, although I put a lot of energy in, actually it's restoring. It restores my energies, and it means then that I can come out and do things like job applications and still feel like my life is meaningful and worth living. So stuff to bring back into the world, yeah. Okay, so those are a couple of things to do with, you know, my states of mind and Amoghasiddhi, so unwinding and coming back together, and then my energies uniting and being integrated and poured into action. But I finally want to talk about the external aspect. And I want to talk about the garden itself, the garden that I'm creating, because it's also that I connect with Amoghasiddhi through creating beauty. So the figure of Amoghasiddhi himself is incredibly beautiful and fascinating. This magical, mythical figure who's sort of you know, perfectly formed and mysterious, and, you know, just a figure that you would gaze at. And so when I'm down at the allotment, down and creating down there, what I'm trying to do is just sort of create these beautiful natural forms. So I'm doing things like creating archways with the, you know, willow, and seated areas where you can just, sort of be at peace there, and planting flowers and growing vines across the archways, and growing fruits. And so I'll do something, and then I'll just have to sort of stand back and see what I've done in order to sort of think about what to do next. So in that process, you know, I'm creating a garden, but it feels like partly through the forms that I'm creating, there's something about archways particularly, I find, that they're these sort of ancient architectural forms, you know, which people have been familiar with for centuries and centuries, and they are, you know, in temples and cathedrals and so on, and they sort of have this kind of mythic quality to them. So it's almost like through creating these buildings, I'm creating a sort of bridge between the everyday, you know, the everyday garden and the mythic realms, through creating beauty. And through doing this, it's almost as if I'm affecting the objective landscape, but I'm also affecting the state of consciousness of the garden itself. So it's almost like bringing a new kind of consciousness into being. Yeah. So how I understand that is that I'm, in a way, one way I could describe that is that I'm creating a realm. And another way I understand it is that I'm sort of building a shrine. So it's sort of, you know, something like building a beautiful shrine like this, but in a three-dimensional context. It's something that you can walk through, dwell in, and be affected by, and connect with that mythic dimension of your life through inhabiting. So that's the final thing, really, I want to point at in a way, and the way that I connect with Amoghasiddhi is through creating a garden and therefore creating a shrine. So in a way, that's what I'm doing down there. Yeah, I've got an allotment, growing veg. It's great. You know, lots of broad beans in time. But I'm creating a shrine to Amoghasiddhi here in Sheffield. So that's it. Thank you.
Hello. So, if I was going to give a title to this talk. It would be something along the lines of coming alive, or how Amitabha has helped me grow. And when I say coming alive, I'm really talking about my emotional life. Because back in secondary school, I did not feel very alive, very out of touch with my emotions, very confused by other people, and distant from myself and from other people. I had a couple of nicknames, and one was Turtle Boy, because of, imagine a kind of head that kind of retreats inside a shell and then sometimes peers out with a slightly kind of downturned kind of mouth. And the other was Robot, because I had this incredible monotonous voice, because I was so sort of afraid of kind of expressing anything, really. And it wasn't that I didn't want to be kind of in touch with people and cheerful and kind to people, but it's just I was that desire was not connected with what I was actually doing. So that wasn't really a nice way of being. But luckily, fast forward kind of 8 or 10 years, and I turned up here. And the first sort of theme of talks at Sangha Night when I started coming along was the same as we're having now. And I really remember one of the first talks that I heard was about Amitabha. And just hearing about, the Buddha of infinite light, radiating this kindness and warmth to all beings, like a kind of sunshine that just kind of glows out, and really wow, really like kind of resonating with that. But I had such a strong sort of sense that I'm just not that kind of person. I'm just not like that. Like, that's kind of a really nice idea, but I couldn't ever really be like that. So I just thought, oh well, that's, we'll just leave that there. And then what happened was I went on my first retreat, and I didn't know it, but it seemed that the theme of this retreat was a lot around Amitabha. Because I remember walking into the shrine room, and it was at Duke's Barn. It was a Sangha retreat at Duke's Barn, and the shrine room was sort of up in the top of this building, kind of nested up, like a cozy, kind of safe shrine room in the roof. And I remember actually seeing this picture here of Amitabha, and just walking in and sort of falling into this gaze, which is this deep kind of gaze, which is sort of has a sort of softness, a gentleness to it. It's not like a harsh kind of glare, but a kind of soft, gentle, kind of warming gaze, but also a gaze that really penetrated something. I felt like it went deep into me, and it kind of cut through all of these stories of, I'm not that kind of person, or I'm just like this, there's just something about me that can't do that kind of emotional connection. And this gaze just went through that and touched something in me, and really resonated with that, really kind of stirred up this a lot of feeling, a lot of emotion, a lot of stuff that I sort of hadn't really realized was there, hadn't dared to believe was there. And oh wow, okay, so maybe there is something there. And just the way that his shoulders are kind of relaxed, sloped down, I just felt that there was this calm, this kind of acceptance sort of pouring off his shoulders and into the room and into me, and that really encouraging, actually. Really encouraging for me to sort of just have a go. Maybe I can just pretend to be kind, and I'm not a hugging person, I told myself. But just while I'm here, I can pretend to be one of those people. And so I did. And it was okay. It worked. But so what really started to get things going was on the retreat, hearing his mantra, Om Amitabha Hari. And I remember Bodhinaga was leading the mantra in the ritual. And I just remember hearing this for the first time and just getting a deep sense of the beauty, really, and a really felt sense of this beauty that was kind of unlike anything I'd really experienced before. And it was amazing to see Bodhinaga kind of leading that, because it was like, how can a man do something so beautiful and so kind of emotional and so kind of, it was all these things that I sort of longed for, but just told myself, I can't do that. And then participating in this mantra, it was my way of, it was a way of expressing this aspiration actually out loud, because that was a really big thing, to actually express this desire to want to be like Amitabha. I remember another time I was in the car home from a retreat, and people were chatting, which of the Buddhas do you most connect with from this mandala? And I was kind of like so shy to admit it. Was like, Amitabha. Because it really, I really couldn't quite see myself as being that kind of person. I had such a strong story that I'm just not like that. So to join in with the mantra was kind of to say, no, I'm going to give this a go. I connect with this, and I want to move in that direction. So since that retreat, I suppose I sort of just gradually, it's had an effect. It's given me confidence to carry on with it. And even outside the safety of that beautiful shrine room, together with everyone in there, even outside of that, I've started to kind of experiment chanting the mantra, even on my own sometimes. Sometimes even out loud on my own. And it has this amazing effect of whatever thoughts, whatever stories are in my head, stories about myself, kind of not being that kind of person, or not being someone who can kind of just connect, can empathize. It cuts through that. It somehow goes deeper to a part of me that can do that. So I think about sometimes when I've got a lot of energy and a lot of thoughts going on, maybe I'll be walking up the road and I'm on my way to the cafe to volunteer in the kitchen at Dana Cafe, which can be quite an intense experience. And if I'm not careful, I'll just get stuck in my own head, and it will all be a bit kind of anxiety-riddled, and kind of I can shrink down into myself, and that's not nice, and it's not really very useful to be there. And I remember one day I was walking up the road, and sort of the mantra just kind of appeared in my mind and started going. And once I got going with that, there was no space left for all of these sort of circling, anxious thoughts that weren't doing any good. And it reminded me, hearing this mantra go around in my head, it reminded me that, I can choose to look out at other people and remember, it's not just me who's going to be struggling maybe in the cafe. And I have a choice here. I have a choice about whether I can just focus on my own anxiety, or whether I can just think, what can I do in this situation? So it was this incredible reminder that I can step out from myself a little bit. And other times, the mantra is like it's like a funnel for my energy to kind of, when I'm sort of really, sometimes I get really kind of excited and a bit kind of carried away, and that can quite easily spiral out of control and just end up being chaotic. I remember recently I went with Andy and Vidya and Dennis. We visited the Birmingham Buddhist Centre, and that was just a riot of fun. And I was just in such a kind of euphoric mood when I left there that, well, it could easily have, I don't know, I could have just gone a bit hyper. And the thing was, I was on my way to stay with my sister, who'd been doing exams for the past couple of weeks, and she was quite worn out and stressed. And I knew if I just go there like this, it's a bit of a clash, really. It sort of felt unfair to arrive like that, and sort of I didn't know what to do with myself though with all this energy. But then out of nowhere, this mantra again kind of appeared, and I started kind of repeating that out loud, and it just transformed everything. I remembered, she's probably had a completely different day to me. And I can choose, actually, to be calm for her and just to calm down and think, well, how's she been? So it kind of reminded me, again, I can be kind here. Yeah. So I'd really encourage anyone who has that feeling of resonating with some of the qualities that we hear about these Buddhas, even if you don't maybe believe that it's possible, maybe just have a go and see what happens. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about Vairocana. There's an image here, and we have this mysterious, imageless shrine for Vairocana, which I think is very fitting, which will come through. So I chose to take up a practice of visualizing Vairocana when I was ordained. So the sadhana practice that I do involves visualizing Vairocana. So it's been really enjoyable reflecting on how I can communicate something about my connection with him to you. And crystallizing my reflections has just been very, very inspiring. And I've been really looking forward to communicating something of these reflections, which I think comes through with what I'll say, why communication is important to me. So to begin with, I wrote a poem about Vairocana while I was on the ordination retreat, and I'm just going to read that out. It's a kind of invocation, if you like, of Vairocana, or my connection with him as well. Verily I embark on this adventure into illumined reality, offering my consciousness to the all-pervading circle, a truth that knows no bounds, an infinite space, a glorious luminosity. And if you didn't notice, it's an acrostic, which means Vairocana's name is represented in that poem. So my connection with Vairocana came about kind of unwittingly, unconscious, like I didn't intend it. I was on solitary only for a short while, maybe 4 days, so a solitary retreat on my own. And I decided to reflect upon and dwell with the Buddhas of the Mandala, except for Vairocana. So I didn't look at Vairocana. I'd heard about the other Buddhas through talks here, and there's this fantastic book by Vairocana called Meeting the Buddhas. So I was reading about each Buddha in turn around the Mandala. So I spent time in Amoghasiddhi, Amitabha, Ratnasamava, and Akshobhya. And I was reflecting on their colours, drawing, doing their mantras, doing pujas, reading, meeting the Buddhas. And then 4 months later to that, I went on a longer solitary, so a 10-day solitary, more in the countryside than I had been. And I put up the pictures that I'd made of the mandala around in the directions for which they symbolise. And at that point, I knew that I would be going on an ordination retreat later in the year, for a 3-month retreat. And I'd been experiencing something that's quite hard to describe, like there was this kind of a space opening up within me, within my body, and white light was part of that. And it was like a connection with a potential that I have within myself, but that everybody else has within themselves too. And so I'd be walking along Fargate and kind of having this experience of everybody having this potential within them, this kind of spaciousness within them. And on this retreat, I wrote just something down just after I'd been meditating. I'd written, let the space breathe, breathe into that space, let the space reign, like a king or a queen would reign. And at that time, I was also looking at the images that I had of the mandala. I felt like I was within the mandala with the images that I had. And the thought just arose, where's Vairocana? And there was just this kind of, this quite solid feeling that Vairocana was this experience that I was having. And I was within the mandala, and Vairocana sits at the centre of the mandala. So I had this sense of kind of knowing something in my body, but when I went to meeting the Buddhas to read about Vairocana, a lot of what I read just was kind of just hitting the mark, just very clear. So Vairocana is a solar symbol. He's associated with the sun. His name means the illuminator. He dispels ignorance with the wisdom of the sphere of truth, the Dharmadhatu. It's all quite kind of ungraspable. He's associated with kingship, and that I'd written, let the space reign, this idea of kind of kingship or of queenship was very inspiring. He's not associated with any time of day or direction like the other Buddhas are, so there's this kind of ungraspable aspect. And he is associated with the element of space. And all of these things, it's hard to say why, they just kind of hit home somehow. And in a sense, it felt like within Vairocana there is the wisdom of all the other Buddhas. He's the white light that refracts and bursts into the colour of all the other Buddhas. And I found that inspiring too. So I went on my ordination retreat, and this connection just happened to strengthen while I was there. I was doing a lot of meditation on this retreat, and within the meditation, if there was any focus, expansive mental states, any bliss, any sense of the unknown, I felt connected to Vairocana within that time, or Vairocana seemed to bring that about even more. And it was almost as if Vairocana was saying, come on an adventure with me, explore this ungraspable, unknowable arena, if you like, of your own consciousness and of consciousness itself. So that was all on my ordination retreat. And I did take up the practice at the point of ordination. So there's two aspects of Vairocana that I want to talk about now. So one is that this unfathomable nature of Vairocana, the unfathomable nature of the Dharma, it's hard to say. But then also this idea or this experience of the all-pervading nature of the Dharma. So the Dharma is reality, and reality is represented in all things. So it's unfathomable, but it's also everywhere. And I think these two aspects come as a kind of a pair. And Vairocana really helps me to kind of hold that, maybe to comprehend it, I'm not sure, but just to have this sense of the Dharma. Hold it in mind, connect with the Dharma, connect with myself, with others, with the world around me. So by unfathomable, I mean that there's something about enlightenment that is unknowable. We can't know it now. I can't know it now in my usual state of being because it's beyond that. It's beyond my normal way of thinking. And if I were to be enlightened, it wouldn't just be me, but kind of a better version of me. And in meditation, I can connect with this expansive perspective through connecting with white light if I'm experiencing bliss in meditation, I have this sense that there are unknown horizons available to me through the practice of meditation, through the practice of the Dharma, and that the Dharma will bring about a complete and total transformation within me. I had a dream while I was on the solitary when Vairocana kind of appeared, where there was just lots of white light and these kind of horizon lines, and a voice saying that it just said, "I see nothing in your future but horizons." And there was just this real kind of yearning to grow and to become even more expansive and than I yet know is even possible. So yeah, there's something about the Dharma or the experience of the Dharma that is subtle and sublime and profound. There's a lot of mystery within the Dharma. There's the Heart Sutra that we speak by heart. And within that verse, there's a line, "Form is only emptiness." And I don't have time to go into kind of what that means, but again, Vairocana kind of helps me to reflect on that form is only emptiness. And Pradaya discussed emptiness and conditionality very well in his talk, so I'd recommend that from last week. And there's a verse from the Sutra of Golden Light which says that the sphere of the Buddha is subtle, wonderful, and very profound. Among all beings, none is able to know it. Among even the greatest of the world's sages, none is able to know it. And there's something I just find really inspiring about that, and Vairocana kind of brings that about for me. And there's a kind of faith that comes out of that for me. And then this other aspect, the all-pervading wisdom. So Vairocana's wisdom is the sphere of reality, and in the Heart Sutra it says form is only emptiness, but also emptiness is only form. So I really enjoy reflecting on how reality cannot but express itself in the form of the things around us and the people around us. And so whatever I look at is a doorway to reality, it's a doorway to a more expansive state of mind. Anything is an indication of the Dharma. So yeah, the Dharma is everywhere, and this is very inspiring to me as well. And Vairocana reminds me of this. So in what is beautiful, in what is profound, but also in the things that I don't like, in hardships, there's doorways to truth in the experiences of those things. And even in mundane things like a meditation cushion, I might look at that, or I might look at the hinge of a door. Even within these things, there's a doorway to understanding reality. And I can reflect on that in different ways through using what I know of the Buddha's teachings. And the all-pervading wisdom of Vairocana reminds me that the Dharma is everywhere. I'm kind of looking at how much to say in the time that I've got. And yeah, this happens very much in meditation, these reflections, but they also happen in the everyday through my interactions with things, with people. And this comes to the final point that I want to make about Vairocana, which is that he has an association with communication. So the symbol of the Dharma chakra, which he's holding, is a symbol of the Dharma, but sometimes he's also in the mudra, the hand gesture of teaching, of communication. And there's a historical link to the Buddha here. The Buddha's first teaching was to do with turning the wheel of the Dharma. And the Buddha was able to communicate his enlightenment to his friends. He had some friends that he kind of left behind. He gained enlightenment and he went back to find them. And I find this really inspiring to reflect on the importance of communication and how all of the Buddha's meetings with his friends, with people that he didn't know, form the basis of the Dharma that we know now, that we learn now. So this symbol of the Dharma chakra, but also this idea of communication, it leads me to believe that there's, and I've read this as well, that in a way no experience is complete unless it's communicated. And I really enjoy reflecting on the importance of communication in that way. And I think there's a link here between what I've been talking about. There's the unfathomable nature of the Dharma, and there's the all-pervading nature of the Dharma. And for me, this comes out in friendship and in communication. So other people, I'm myself, I can't fathom myself. I can't fathom other people either. Yet we all have this potential for enlightenment, and on a more mundane level, every person has the potential to connect with each other as well, and I have the potential to connect with every other person. So yeah, there's always this possibility of connection and communication, and through this connection, anything is possible. So not the easiest to describe my own experience here, but I'm hoping that that was in some way an introduction to Vairocana. And I've said this before, sometimes it's like I want to introduce you to my really good friend, and I hope you get to know him as well. And I think I'll just finish with the poem that I read out initially again. Verily I embark on this adventure into illumined reality, offering my consciousness to the all-pervading circle, a truth that knows no bounds, an infinite space, a glorious luminosity.